Assalamu alaykum, my brothers and sisters. Picture this. In the bustling streets of Cairo during the 1960s, while political tensions reach their peak and the iron fist of authoritarianism tightens around Egypt, a woman sits in a dark prison cell, her body broken by torture, but her spirit unshaken. This is not just any woman, this is Zaynab al-Ghazali, the fearless activist who dared to challenge dictators and paid the ultimate price for her unwavering principles. Welcome back to Voices of Courage. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you're inspired by stories of extraordinary resilience. Today we're diving deep into the life of a 20th century revolutionary who redefined what it meant to be a Muslim woman fighting for justice in the modern world. The early 1900s in Egypt were a time of tremendous upheaval. Colonial powers were retreating, new nations were emerging, and Islamic movements were struggling to find their place in a rapidly changing world. It was into this turbulent era that our protagonist was born. A woman who would become one of the most influential Islamic feminists of the modern age. Zaynab al-Ghazali was born in 1917 in the village of Mitysh in the Beira Governorate of Egypt. From her earliest days, she displayed a fierce independence that would define her entire life. At just 18 years old, she made a decision that shocked her conservative family and society. She divorced her first husband because he tried to prevent her from pursuing her religious and social activism. This wasn't rebellion for its own sake. This was a young woman who understood that her calling was bigger than conventional expectations. In 1936, at the age of 19, Zaynab founded the Muslim Women's Association, an organization that would become one of the most influential Islamic women's movements in the Arab world. But this wasn't your typical women's charity group. This was a revolutionary organization that combined Islamic principles with practical social action. The association provided education for women, healthcare for the poor, and most importantly, a platform for women to engage in religious and political discourse. What made Zaynab's approach so revolutionary was how she merged traditional Islamic scholarship with modern activism. She wasn't content to simply accept interpretations of Islam that limited women's roles. Instead, she delved deep into Islamic sources, studying the Quran and Hadith to demonstrate that Islam actually empowered women to be active participants in society. Her scholarship was rigorous, her arguments were compelling, and her conclusions challenged centuries of patriarchal interpretations. Her organization grew rapidly, attracting thousands of women across Egypt who were hungry for both spiritual growth and social engagement. They established schools, provided vocational training, and created support networks for women facing domestic violence or economic hardship. But Zaynab's vision extended beyond social services. She was building a movement of conscious Muslim women who understood their rights and responsibilities within an Islamic framework. By the 1940s, Zaynab had aligned herself with the Muslim Brotherhood, seeing in their movement a genuine attempt to implement Islamic governance in the modern world. She wasn't just a supporter, she became one of their most effective organizers and theorists. Her ability to articulate Islamic political theory in accessible terms made her invaluable to the Brotherhood's mission. But this alliance would soon put her on a collision course with the Egyptian state. When Gamal Abdel Nasser came to power in 1952, he initially maintained cordial relations with the Muslim Brotherhood. However, as his secular nationalist vision solidified, he increasingly saw Islamic movements as threats to his authority. The relationship deteriorated rapidly, culminating in the complete suppression of the Brotherhood and the arrest of its members. Zaynab, as one of the movement's most prominent figures, became a prime target. In 1965, she was arrested as part of a massive crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood. What followed was 6 years of imprisonment that would test every fiber of her being. But here's where Zaynab's story becomes truly extraordinary. Instead of breaking under the pressure, she used her imprisonment as an opportunity to deepen her faith and strengthen her resolve. The conditions in Nasser's prisons were deliberately brutal. Political prisoners faced systematic torture, psychological abuse, and deliberate humiliation designed to crush their spirits. Zaynab endured beatings, electric shocks, and prolonged solitary confinement. She was hung from her wrists until her shoulders dislocated, subjected to sexual abuse, and forced to witness the torture of her fellow prisoners. But through it all, she maintained her dignity and her faith. What's remarkable about Zaynab's experience is how she transformed her suffering into spiritual growth. She would later write that her prison years were among the most spiritually productive of her life. She memorized additional portions of the Quran, developed new theological insights, and mentored younger prisoners who looked to her for guidance and hope. Her cell became a classroom, her suffering became a testimony, and her endurance became an inspiration. During her imprisonment, she began writing what would become her most famous work, Days from My Life. This autobiographical account of her prison experience became one of the most powerful testimonies of political resistance in modern Islamic literature. But it wasn't just a chronicle of suffering. It was a theological reflection on the meaning of struggle in the path of Allah, a meditation on the relationship between worldly justice and divine purpose. Her writing style was deeply personal yet universally relevant. She described her torture not with self-pity, but with the analytical eye of a scholar examining the psychology of oppression. She documented the strategies she used to maintain her sanity and faith, the prayers that sustained her through the darkest moments, and the dreams and visions that convinced her that her suffering had meaning within Allah's plan. When she was finally released in 1971, Zaynab emerged from prison transformed but unbroken. She had entered as an activist and emerged as a spiritual authority whose credibility was sealed by her willingness to suffer for her beliefs. Her prison experience had given her a moral authority that no academic degree or political position could provide. Her post-prison years were marked by prolific writing and speaking that influenced Islamic movements worldwide. She wrote extensively about women's roles in Islamic society, always grounding her arguments in careful Quranic exegesis and hadith analysis. Her approach was scholarly rigorous, yet practically applicable, addressing real issues faced by Muslim women in rapidly changing societies. One of her most significant contributions was her articulation of what she called Islamic feminism, though she often rejected the term feminism as too Western. She argued that Islam, properly understood, provided women with rights and responsibilities that were more comprehensive than anything offered by secular feminist movements. Her position was that Muslim women didn't need to abandon their faith to achieve equality. They needed to understand and implement their faith correctly. Her interpretation of women's roles was nuanced and sophisticated. She argued that while men and women had different primary responsibilities within the family and society, these differences didn't imply hierarchy or inequality. Women, in her view, were equally responsible for implementing Islamic values in society, equally capable of scholarly and intellectual achievement, and equally accountable to Allah for their choices and actions. But Zaynab wasn't just a theorist, she remained an active organizer throughout her later years. She rebuilt her Muslim Women's Association, established new educational programs, and mentored a new generation of Islamic activists. Her home became a gathering place for scholars, activists, and seekers from around the world who came to learn from her experience and wisdom. Her influence extended far beyond Egypt's borders. Islamic movements in other Arab countries, in Southeast Asia, and even in Muslim minority communities in the West, looked to her writings and example for guidance. She became a global symbol of principled resistance to oppression, and a model of how Islamic activism could maintain its authenticity while engaging with modern realities. What made Zaynab's approach so effective was her ability to speak to multiple audiences simultaneously. To traditional scholars, she demonstrated impeccable Islamic credentials and rigorous methodology. To secular feminists, she showed that religious women could be equally committed to gender justice. To political activists, she proved that Islamic principles could provide a solid foundation for resistance to tyranny. Her theological contributions were particularly significant in the area of women's spiritual development. She argued that the highest forms of Islamic worship, including jihad in its various forms, were equally available to women and men. Her own prison experience became a model of how suffering in the path of Allah could be transformed into spiritual advancement and social testimony. Zaynab's concept of jihad was comprehensive and sophisticated. She understood it to include not just physical resistance to oppression, but intellectual struggle against ignorance, social struggle against injustice, and spiritual struggle against the ego. Her own life embodied all these dimensions of jihad, making her a living example of Islamic activism in its fullest sense. Her writing style evolved throughout her career, becoming increasingly mystical and spiritually oriented while maintaining its practical relevance. Her later works dealt with themes of divine providence, the meaning of suffering, and the relationship between worldly struggle and spiritual purification. These themes were not abstract theological speculation, but were grounded in her lived experience of imprisonment, torture, and eventual vindication. The impact of her work extended into academic circles as well. Scholars of Islamic studies, women's studies, and political science found in her writings a unique perspective that combined insider knowledge of Islamic movements with sophisticated analysis of power, resistance, and gender. Her work became required reading in university courses around the world. Her influence on contemporary Islamic feminism cannot be overstated. Thinkers like Amina Wadud, Asma Barlas, and others have built upon foundations that she helped establish. Her demonstration that rigorous Islamic scholarship could support women's empowerment opened doors for a new generation of Muslim women scholars who continue to develop Islamic feminist theology. But perhaps her most lasting legacy lies in the model she provided of principled resistance to oppression. Her willingness to suffer imprisonment and torture rather than compromise her beliefs demonstrated that Islamic activism could maintain its integrity even under the most extreme pressure. This example has inspired countless activists facing similar challenges in various parts of the world. Her relationship with power was complex and instructive. She never sought political office for herself, believing that her role was to influence those in power, rather than to wield power directly. Yet her influence on Islamic political movements was profound, and her writings continue to shape how Islamic parties and organizations think about governance, justice, and the role of civil society. Zaynab's understanding of social change was deeply rooted in Islamic concepts of gradual transformation and divine timing. She believed that lasting change required spiritual preparation, as well as political action, that societies needed to be internally ready for Islamic governance rather than having it imposed from above. This perspective influenced her approach to activism and her relationship with various political movements. Her critique of secular nationalism was nuanced and sophisticated. She didn't reject all aspects of modern governance or social organization, but she insisted that any political system in Muslim societies needed to be grounded in Islamic principles and values. Her opposition to Nasser wasn't just political disagreement. It was a fundamental rejection of the idea that Islamic societies could achieve justice and prosperity while ignoring their spiritual foundations. The personal costs of her activism were enormous. Her marriages suffered because of her commitments. Her health was permanently damaged by her prison experience, and she faced constant surveillance and harassment even after her release. Yet she never expressed regret about her choices, viewing her sacrifices as necessary contributions to the cause of Islamic revival. Her approach to interfaith relations was marked by both firmness and respect. She maintained that Islam offered the most complete guidance for human society, while acknowledging that people of other faiths could be allies in struggles for justice and morality. Her prison experience had brought her into contact with secular and Christian activists, and these relationships influenced her understanding of coalition building and common cause. Zaynab al-Ghazali died in 2005 at the age of 88, having lived to see many of the changes she had advocated for beginning to take root in Muslim societies around the world. The rise of Islamic parties in democratic elections, the growth of Islamic feminist scholarship, and the increasing recognition of women's roles in Islamic movements all bore the imprint of her influence. Her funeral was attended by thousands of mourners from across the political spectrum, a testament to the respect she had earned even from those who disagreed with her positions. Government officials, opposition leaders, secular intellectuals, and religious scholars all acknowledged her significance as a pioneering figure in modern Islamic thought and activism. But her true legacy lies not in monuments or institutions, but in the countless individuals whose lives were transformed by her example and teachings. The women who found the courage to pursue Islamic scholarship, the activists who learned to maintain their principles under pressure, the scholars who discovered new dimensions of Islamic social teaching, all carry forward aspects of her vision and commitment. In our contemporary world, where Muslim women continue to face challenges in asserting their religious and social rights, Zaynab al-Ghazali's example remains powerfully relevant. Her demonstration that Islamic authenticity and women's empowerment could be mutually reinforcing, rather than contradictory, continues to inspire new generations of Muslim feminists and activists. Her story reminds us that the struggle for justice requires both intellectual rigor and personal courage, that lasting change emerges from the intersection of scholarship and sacrifice, and that the most powerful resistance to oppression often comes from those who root their activism in unshakable spiritual convictions. What aspects of Zaynab al-Ghazali's extraordinary journey resonate most deeply with your own struggles and aspirations? Share your reflections in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if her story has moved or inspired you. Subscribe to our channel for more profiles of remarkable figures who have shaped the Islamic world through their courage and conviction. Until next time, remember that every generation faces its own tests of faith and principle, and the choices we make in those moments define not just our own legacy, but the path forward for those who come after us.